A routine flight, an ordinary passenger, at least that's what the flight attendant thought. With contempt in her eyes and words laced with prejudice, she did not hesitate to humiliate the woman, oblivious to the fact that she had just insulted one of the most powerful figures in the United States. But then, a single mistake turned everything upside down in a way no one could have foreseen. What will happen when the truth is revealed? Stay with us until the very end. This story will leave you speechless. If you love meaningful and dramatic stories, don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss the next unexpected twist. And now the story begins. The flight from Atlanta to New York began like any other. Passengers boarded with different states of mind. Business professionals glued to their phones, families struggling to keep their children in check, and a few elite travelers settling into their first-class seats with effortless confidence. Among them was Victoria Caldwell, a renowned name in the legal world, though not widely recognized outside of it. Unlike her stern demeanor in the courtroom, today she wore an elegant emerald green Valentino dress, paired with a refined Louis Vuitton handbag. Despite her high status, she had never been one for ostentation. This trip to New York was for an important civil rights conference. The first signs of trouble appeared just as the passengers settled into their seats. A flight attendant, around 30, with blonde hair, Lindsay Monroe, displayed an unusual coldness. As she approached Victoria, her gaze flickered over the judge's designer dress, and her expression darkened. "Ma'am, you're in the wrong seat." Her tone was dry, her eyes laced with implication. Victoria calmly presented her ticket, where her first-class seat was clearly marked. Lindsay's lips pressed into a thin line. "This area is for first-class passengers only." Victoria arched an eyebrow but remained composed. "I'm aware. This is my seat." Huffing, Lindsay turned on her heel, but not before muttering just loudly enough for Victoria to hear. So easy to get a free upgrade these days. As the flight progressed, Lindsay's attitude only worsened. When Victoria requested a glass of water, Lindsay deliberately ignored her, tending to every other passenger first. A fellow flight attendant, sensing the tension, discreetly brought Victoria the drink along with a quiet apology. But the final straw came when Victoria rose to head toward the restroom. Lindsay stepped in front of her, blocking the aisle. "Excuse me, but passengers like you shouldn't be walking around first class as if this is your place." Her voice was sharp, loud enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. Victoria froze. Her face remained calm, but inside, a storm was brewing. "I'm simply going to the restroom." Lindsay smirked, her gaze filled with condescension. "The ones in the back, coach is where you belong." The chilling remark sent a brief silence through the first-class cabin. Victoria inhaled deeply, keeping her posture straight. "I will return to my seat after using the restroom. That is my right." A flush of red crept up Lindsay's face, her eyes blazing with irritation. "Don't get smart with me." As Victoria returned to her seat, she noticed Lindsay lingering nearby, arms crossed, her gaze dripping with hostility. But she wasn't done yet. Her attention shifted to Victoria's designer handbag, neatly stored in the overhead compartment. A flicker of satisfaction crossed her face. She had found a new target. "Ma'am, we've received a complaint about your luggage." Her voice was louder than necessary, drawing curious glances from the surrounding passengers. "I need to inspect it." Victoria looked up, her composure unwavering. She could feel the weight of Lindsay's unwarranted scrutiny, along with the watchful eyes of others. "My luggage is stored properly, and I can assure you it complies with all regulations." Her voice was steady, neither raised nor lowered, but it carried a weight that made people think twice. Lindsay smirked, her expression laced with mockery. She leaned in slightly, her tone quieter but still dripping with accusation. "Are you refusing to comply with a flight attendant's directive?" Victoria's fingers tightened slightly in her lap, but she refused to react the way Lindsay wanted. "I am not refusing. I simply find this inspection unnecessary." But before Victoria could finish her sentence, Lindsay reached up and yanked the handbag from the compartment. The strap caught on Victoria's dress. A sharp, tearing sound ripped through the silence of the first-class cabin. Gasps erupted from the surrounding seats. Victoria instinctively clutched at the fabric, the once elegant emerald silk now hanging awkwardly in tatters, exposing her in a way both clumsy and humiliating. That's enough. Her voice was not loud, but it was razor-sharp, cutting through the charged atmosphere like a blade. Her eyes burned with righteous fury, yet her expression remained composed. Lindsay flushed red but refused to back down. People like you think you can just walk in here without any consequences. Victoria rose to her full height. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her presence alone was enough to command the room. Stop this, now. Her tone remained calm, but it carried an unmistakable authority. Do you have any idea who you're speaking to? Lindsay rolled her eyes, her voice hard with irritation. I don't care who you are, but you're about to be removed from this flight. A man seated a few rows away could no longer stay silent. Do you even know who she is? His voice rang with disbelief. Lindsay spun around, startled by the unexpected intervention. What? That's Judge Victoria Caldwell. The man continued, his voice growing louder. A United States Federal Supreme Court Justice. A ripple of murmurs spread through the cabin. Passengers exchanged stunned glances. Lindsay's face went rigid, the pink flush on her cheeks draining into sheer disbelief. A Supreme Court Justice? She stammered, her voice suddenly devoid of confidence. An older passenger seated in first class spoke up. Justice Patterson. She's one of the most influential figures in this country. Silence fell over the cabin. All eyes locked onto Lindsay. For the first time, she had no retort. Supreme Court Justice. Lindsay's hands trembled as the weight of reality crashed down on her. The arrogance she had worn so easily was gone, leaving behind a pale, shaken woman drowning under the judgmental stares around her. Victoria narrowed her eyes, her gaze like ice. You haven't just insulted me. Her voice was low, yet it carried an undeniable authority. You violated my personal space, damaged my property, and most importantly, you have humiliated yourself in front of an entire cabin of witnesses. Lindsay's lips parted, but no words came out. The crushing silence, filled with a mix of condemnation and scorn, swallowed her whole. For the remainder of the flight, the air hung heavy with tension. Lindsay avoided Victoria's gaze, her movements robotic as she went through the motions of her duties. Victoria sat quietly, her torn dress held together with a few safety pins, kindly offered by a sympathetic passenger. When the plane touched down at LaGuardia Airport, Victoria glanced out the window. A group of uniformed officers stood waiting at the gate. Word had spread quickly, likely fueled by the dozens of passengers who had recorded the entire incident on their phones. As soon as the aircraft came to a complete stop, the captain's voice crackled through the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. Law enforcement will be boarding momentarily. Lindsay's face turned ghostly pale as two officers entered the cabin. The lead officer spoke with firm authority. MS. Lindsay Monroe, please come with us. Lindsay's mouth opened slightly, but this time, there was no protest. With no other choice, she stood, her movements stiff, and followed the officers down the aisle. The defiance that had once gleamed in Lindsay's eyes had shattered completely, leaving only fear and humiliation in its wake. A few minutes later, a man in a crisp suit approached Victoria. Justice Patterson, I'm the regional director for this airline. I cannot express how deeply sorry we are for this incident. Victoria looked up, her gaze steady but unyielding. I don't need an apology. Her voice was sharp as a blade. I need a full investigation and concrete changes. No one else should have to go through this. By the time Victoria arrived at her hotel, the story had already exploded across national news. Footage of Lindsay yanking Victoria's bag, tearing her dress in the process, had gone viral at lightning speed. Hashtags like #JusticeCaldwell and #FlyingWhileBlack dominated social media. The airline quickly issued a public apology, announcing that Lindsay had been suspended pending an internal investigation. Meanwhile, influential figures in politics and law spoke out in support of Victoria, calling the incident a blatant example of racial discrimination and systemic injustice. Lindsay's career unraveled overnight. The media dug into her past, uncovering a history of passenger complaints about her unprofessional conduct. The storm was just beginning. Public outrage surged, with protests and calls for accountability growing louder. Desperate to salvage her image, Lindsay released an apology video, her voice trembling, but many doubted the sincerity behind her words. Victoria, however, remained composed. She issued a powerful statement, emphasizing the urgent need for systemic change, urging airlines to implement stricter policies and better staff training to prevent such incidents in the future. "This is not just about me," she told the press. "This is about everyone who has ever faced discrimination. This is about the justice that every person deserves." Victoria's experience ignited a nationwide conversation about racial bias in the airline industry. Within weeks, she partnered with civil rights organizations, pushing for industry-wide reform. Airlines across the country began implementing mandatory diversity and sensitivity training for employees. New policies were introduced to ensure passenger complaints were handled more effectively. For Lindsay, the consequences were severe. She lost her job, and her reputation plummeted. Her story became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the cost of prejudice and abuse of power. As for Victoria, she turned her humiliation into a catalyst for change. Her calm yet unwavering determination inspired millions, proving that even in the face of indignity, dignity and resilience could prevail. Above all, she reminded America that justice doesn't only exist in courtrooms. It must be upheld everywhere, even 30,000 feet in the air. This story serves as a powerful reminder of fairness, dignity, and the lasting impact of our actions. If you were in Victoria's position, how would you have responded? Have you ever witnessed or experienced injustice that compelled you to speak out? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice could inspire change. If you found this story meaningful, share it with your friends and family to spread the message of respect and justice. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story and life lesson. Together, we can build a better world, one meaningful action at a time. Thank you for supporting this channel. Like, share, and subscribe for the latest updates. These stories are collected from various sources and do not represent any specific individual or organization. They are shared to promote positive values and have been rewritten with AI assistance. If there are any inaccuracies, we appreciate your understanding. Wishing you all the best in life.